My daughter-in-law forgot her phone on and I heard her say, "That old freeloader only shows up when she needs something." My blood froze. She had forgotten who was paying the rent. I just made a call and she got a surprise. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought a simple visit to my son's house would shatter everything I believed about my family. At 70 years old, I'd learned to expect disappointments, but nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered that Tuesday afternoon. The drive to Adam's place had become routine over the past 3 years. Every other week, I'd make the 20-minute journey across town, usually carrying groceries or small gifts for my grandson Tommy. That day was no different. I had a bag of his favorite cookies and a new coloring book tucked under my arm as I knocked on their apartment door. Skylar answered with her usual bright smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Janet, what a lovely surprise." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume overwhelming in the small entryway. "Adam's still at work, but Tommy's napping." I handed her the bag. "Just a few things for Tommy. How's he been?" "Oh, you know how 3-year-olds are." She laughed, that tinkling sound she made when she wanted something. "Exhausting but adorable." We settled in their living room, and I couldn't help but notice the new coffee table. Expensive-looking glass and chrome that definitely wasn't there last week. I bit my tongue, though. At my age, you learn when to speak and when to stay silent. "Would you like some tea?" Skylar asked, already heading toward the kitchen. "That would be lovely, dear." As she busied herself with the kettle, I glanced around the apartment I'd been helping to pay for since they moved in. The rent alone was $1,800 a month, more than many people's entire income. Then there were the utilities, the car payment I'd helped with when Adam's hours got cut, the daycare fees when Skylar decided she needed personal time. The numbers had never bothered me before. What was money compared to family? I'd raised Adam as a single mother after his father left when he was 8. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital, missed countless social events, saved every penny to give him opportunities one never had. Seeing him settled with a wife and child felt like validation of all those sacrifices. "I'll just use your bathroom quickly," I called out, heading down the narrow hallway. That's when I heard it. Skylar's voice crystal clear through the thin bathroom door. She must have taken a call while the kettle was heating. No, she's here right now," she was saying, her tone completely different from the sweet voice she'd used with me moments before. "The old woman just showed up with more stuff for Tommy." I froze, my hand on the bathroom door handle. "I know, right?" Skylar continued, and I could hear her moving around the kitchen. "She thinks she's being so generous, but honestly it's pathetic. This whole doting grandmother act is just her way of staying relevant." My chest tightened. Surely she couldn't be talking about me. The worst part is how she acts like she's doing us such huge favors. Like, hello? You chose to help us. Nobody forced you to pay our rent every month. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the bathroom door, my legs suddenly unsteady. "She's such an approval seeker." Skylar's voice grew more animated, more cruel. "Always fishing for thank yous and compliments. It's honestly embarrassing. And the way she hovers around Tommy like he's her own kid? Creepy much." I wanted to cover my ears, but I couldn't move. Each word was a knife twist. "Adam feels sorry for her, you know? He thinks she's lonely since she retired." But I'm like, that's not our problem. We didn't ask her to make us her whole world. She's the one who chose not to have friends or hobbies. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was the woman I'd welcomed into our family, the woman I'd helped furnish her first apartment, the woman whose baby shower I'd hosted and paid for. The truth is, she's just a lonely old woman who can't accept that her son has his own life now. So she buys her way in with rent money and gifts. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. I heard her laugh, that same tinkling sound that now made my skin crawl. "Oh, I'm sweet as pie" to her face. "Are you kidding? Why would I rock the boat when she's literally paying for our lifestyle? Adam makes decent money, but not enough for this place and everything else. His mom's guilt money is what keeps us comfortable." Guilt money. That's what my love had been reduced to. The best part is, she thinks we actually need her help. Like we're struggling or something. Please. If she stopped paying tomorrow, we just move somewhere cheaper. But why would we when she's so eager to play the martyr? I slumped against the bathroom wall, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Skylar would hear it through the door. 25 years I'd been a single mother. 25 years of putting Adam first, of making sure he never felt the absence of his father. And this is what it had led to. She keeps hinting about being included more in Tommy's life too. Like she wants to babysit regularly or have him for weekends. Can you imagine? I love Adam, but I'm not dealing with his clingy mother any more than I have to. The kettle started whistling, but Skylar didn't seem to notice. Anyway, I should go. She's probably wondering where her precious tea is. I'll call you later and we can laugh about whatever desperate attempt at bonding she tries today. I heard her footsteps approaching the kitchen, heard her end the call. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there in that small bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. The woman looking back at me seemed older somehow, more fragile than the one who'd knocked on the door 10 minutes earlier. My hands were shaking as I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face. I needed to compose myself. I couldn't let Skylar see that I'd heard anything. Not yet. When I emerged from the bathroom, Skylar was arranging cookies on a plate, humming softly. She looked up with that practiced smile. There you are. I was just getting everything ready. The tea should be perfect now. I sat down on their expensive couch, accepting the delicate cup she handed me. The porcelain felt fragile in my trembling hands. So, Skylar settled across from me. How have you been, Janet? It feels like we never get to really talk anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted to talk now, after I just heard exactly what she really thought of our conversations. I've been well, I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Keeping busy. That's wonderful. You know, Adam and I were just saying how impressed we are with how active you stay. Not everyone your age has so much energy. Every word felt calculated now, designed to make me feel useful while keeping me at arm's length. How had I not seen it before? We made small talk for another 20 minutes. Skylar asked about my garden, my book club, my volunteer work at the animal shelter. She seemed genuinely interested, nodding at all the right moments, making appropriate comments. If I hadn't heard that phone conversation, I would have thought she actually cared. But now I could see the performance for what it was. The slight glances at her phone, the way her smile never wavered, the practiced questions that required minimal engagement. She was going through the motions, playing the role of the caring daughter-in-law, while mentally calculating how much longer she had to endure my presence. When Tommy woke up from his nap, crying from his bedroom, Skylar jumped up with obvious relief. I should get him, she said. He gets cranky when he wakes up alone. I watched her disappear down the hallway, and for the first time I didn't ask if I could help. I didn't offer to comfort my grandson or ask if I could read him a story. Instead, I sat there processing the devastating truth I'd stumbled upon. This family I'd built my entire world around, these people I'd sacrificed everything for, saw me as nothing more than a convenient bank account with emotional needs they had to tolerate. The worst part wasn't even Skylar's cruelty. It was the realization that Adam knew. He had to know how his wife really felt about me, and he'd chosen to say nothing. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man I'd put through college, the father I helped support, was complicit in this charade. When Skylar returned with a sleepy Tommy in her arms, I stood up. I should probably head home, I said, gathering my purse. I don't want to overstay my welcome. The irony of that phrase hung in the air. Skylar didn't contradict me, didn't insist I stay longer like she usually did. Of course, she said, adjusting Tommy on her hip. Thanks for stopping by. And for the cookies. Tommy loves those ones. I kissed my grandson's forehead, breathing in his sweet scent, wondering when I'd be allowed to see him again. Or if I'd even want to, knowing what his mother really thought of me. The drive home was a blur. I must have been operating on autopilot because I don't remember making the turns or stopping at the lights. I just found myself sitting in my own driveway, staring at the house I'd lived in for 32 years. Inside, the silence was overwhelming. No television, no radio, just the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt cavernous, past photographs that now seemed like monuments to my own delusion. There was Adam's high school graduation picture, the one where he's hugging me tight, both of us beaming. His college diploma that I'd framed and hung in the living room. Wedding photos where Skylar and I posed together, her arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling for the camera. All of it felt false now. Had any of those moments been real, or had they all been performances for my benefit? I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Adam had done his homework for 12 years. The same table where we'd shared countless meals, where I'd listened to his problems and celebrated his successes. That's when the full weight of it hit me. Not just the betrayal, but the complete restructuring of my reality that would have to follow. Every interaction I'd had with them over the past 3 years would need to be re-examined. Every smile, every thank you, every invitation to family dinners. Had Skylar been laughing at me the whole time? Had she and her friends been sharing stories about the pathetic old woman who was so desperate for family that she'd pay any price to belong? The thought made me physically ill. As darkness fell outside my kitchen window, I realized something else. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard what I'd heard. I couldn't go back to playing the role of the grateful grandmother, content with whatever scraps of affection they threw my way. Something fundamental had shifted in that bathroom, and there was no going back. The question now was what I was going to do about it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Skylar's voice calling me a lonely old woman who buys her way in with rent money. By dawn, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, surrounded by bank statements and receipts I'd pulled from my filing cabinet. The numbers were staggering when laid out like this. Over the past 3 years, I'd given them nearly $65,000. Not loaned, given. $1,800 every month for rent, plus utilities that averaged another $200. Car payments when Adam's hours were reduced. Daycare fees. Groceries when money was tight. Christmas gifts that cost more than some people's monthly salaries. I stared at the electric bill from last month. $147. For a 2-bedroom apartment. How does an electric bill get that high unless you're running the air conditioning constantly and leaving every light on? But I'd paid it without question, just like I'd paid all the others. My hands trembled as I sorted through the receipts. Tommy's birthday party last year at that expensive indoor playground. For $100 because Skylar said she wanted to give him the best. His first Christmas, where I'd bought not just gifts for him but for Adam and Skylar too, because it wouldn't be fair for Tommy to have presents and the adults to have nothing. Each receipt was a memory, and now each memory felt tainted. I remembered the day they'd asked me to help with the apartment deposit. Adam had called, his voice careful and apologetic. "Mom, I hate to ask, but Skylar found this perfect place. It's in a great school district for when Tommy's older, and it's safe. But they want first month, last month, and security deposit. It's a lot, but it would really set us up for the future. $5,400. I transferred it the same day. You're literally saving our lives," Skylar had said when they picked up the keys. She'd hugged me so tight, tears in her eyes. "I don't know what we would have done without you. Tommy is so lucky to have a grandmother who cares this much." Had those tears been real? Or just another performance? How long had she been planning to use my love against me? The morning light streaming through my kitchen window illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, and I found myself thinking about my own mother. She died when Adam was 15, but before that, she'd never had much money to help us. What she'd given was her time, her presence, her unwavering support. When Adam had trouble with math in 7th grade, my mother had sat with him every evening, patiently working through problems until he understood. When he'd broken his arm playing baseball, she'd taken time off from her job at the diner to drive him to physical therapy twice a week. She'd never paid for anything major because she couldn't. But Adam had adored her. He'd cried harder at her funeral than I'd ever seen him cry. What was the difference between her love and mine? Why had her presence been enough, but mine required a constant flow of money to be valued? The answer hit me like a slap. Because I'd taught them that's what my love looked like. I thought back to Adam's childhood, to all the times I'd tried to make up for his father's absence with material things. Dance lessons because his friend's dad coached Little League. The expensive baseball glove because I couldn't teach him to throw properly. The gaming system when he was 12 because I was working nights and felt guilty about the babysitter. I'd been buying love for so long. I'd forgotten there was any other way to give it. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Adam's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But old habits die hard. Hi, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. Hey, Mom. Skylar said you stopped by yesterday. Sorry I missed you. That's all right. I just brought a few things for Tommy. You're always spoiling him, Adam laughed, and the sound that used to warm my heart now felt hollow. Listen, I was calling because we're having some friends over this weekend for a barbecue. Nothing fancy, just burgers and beer. But if you're free Saturday afternoon, you should come. A barbecue with their friends. People who probably knew exactly how Skylar felt about me, who might have been part of those conversations where she mocked the pathetic old woman who paid their bills. That sounds lovely, I heard myself say. What can I bring? Oh, you don't need to bring anything. Just yourself. But even as he said it, I could hear the expectation underneath. I always brought something. The expensive steaks when they barbecued. The craft beer Adam liked. The fancy desserts from the bakery downtown. This invitation wasn't really about wanting my company. It was about what I'd contribute to their party. Actually, I said slowly, I think I might have planned Saturday. Let me check and get back to you. A pause. Oh, okay. Well, let me know. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone. That pause said everything. Adam was surprised I hadn't immediately said yes. Surprised I might have something more important to do than cater to their social events. When was the last time they'd invited me somewhere that didn't cost me money? When had we last spent time together where I wasn't expected to pay for dinner or bring expensive gifts? I couldn't remember. The realization sent me back to my photo albums, searching for clues I'd missed. There was last Christmas, all of us around their tree. I'd bought the tree, the decorations, and most of the presents underneath it. In the photo, Skylar's smile looked genuine, her arm around my shoulders as we posed with Tommy. But now I could see what I'd missed before. The way Adam's attention was focused on his phone in the background. The expensive jewelry Skylar was wearing, jewelry I'd helped pay for through their emergency car repair that turned out to cost 3 times what they'd initially said. I flipped through more photos and the pattern became clear. Every happy family moment had a price tag attached. The vacation photos where I'd surprised them with a week at the beach. The restaurant photos from Tommy's first birthday, where I'd insisted on taking everyone to that expensive steakhouse. The pictures from Adam's promotion dinner, where I'd picked up the check for 12 people because it was a celebration. In every single photo I was smiling, genuinely radiantly happy to be included, to be needed, to be part of their lives. And in every single photo I now realized I was being used. My doorbell rang around noon, and I looked out to see Skylar's car in my driveway. She was alone, which was unusual. She never visited without Adam or Tommy as a buffer. I opened the door to find her holding a plate of cookies, the same cookies I'd brought yesterday. I thought you might like some of these, she said with that bright smile. Tommy helped me make them this morning. She was trying so hard to seem natural, but I could see the effort now. The way her smile was a fraction too wide. The way her voice was pitched slightly higher than normal. That's very thoughtful, I said, accepting the plate. Would you like to come in? Just for a minute. I can't stay long. We sat in my living room, the same room where she'd complimented my furniture, and asked about my decorating choices. Now I wondered if she'd been mentally calculating how much everything was worth, filing away information for later use. I hope yesterday wasn't too overwhelming, she said, settling into my favorite armchair. Tommy was so cranky when he woke up. I felt bad that you didn't get much time with him. He's 3. 3-year-olds get cranky. Exactly. She laughed, but it sounded forced. I keep telling Adam that maybe when he's older, like school age, he might enjoy spending weekends with Grandma. Right now he's just so attached to his routine. There it was. The subtle dismissal, wrapped in concern for Tommy's well-being. When he's older. When it's more convenient for them. When they're sure I'll still be useful enough to warrant the inconvenience. Of course, I said quietly. His routine is important. We made small talk for another 10 minutes. Skylar complimented my garden, asked about my book club, mentioned how nice the weather had been. All surface-level pleasantries that required nothing from her, except the ability to make appropriate sounds at the right moments. When she left, she hugged me at the door. Thanks for being so understanding, Janet. Not every mother-in-law would be so flexible. After she drove away, I stood in my empty house holding a plate of cookies made from ingredients I'd probably paid for, feeling more alone than I had since Adam's father left 27 years ago. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my neighbor Eleanor. We'd been friendly for the past decade, sharing occasional conversations over the fence, but I'd never had time for real friendship. I was always too busy being available for Adam's family. Janet. Eleanor's voice was warm with surprise. How lovely to hear from you. I was just thinking about you yesterday. Were you? Yes, I saw you coming home from somewhere and you looked tired. I almost came over to check on you, but I didn't want to intrude. The kindness in her voice made my throat tight. When was the last time someone had been concerned about me without wanting something in return? Eleanor, I said carefully. What do you do when you realize you've been living your life all wrong? A long pause. Oh, honey, what's happened? And for the first time in 3 years, I told someone the truth about my life. Not the version where I was the happy grandmother helping her loving family, but the real version. The one where I discovered I was nothing more than a walking ATM with inconvenient emotional needs. Eleanor listened without judgment, making soft sounds of understanding and sympathy. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Janet, she said finally, you know what you have to do. I did know. I'd known since yesterday afternoon, sitting in that bathroom listening to Skylar destroy every illusion I'd held about my place in their lives. But knowing and doing are two very different things. And what I was contemplating would change everything forever. The question was whether I had the courage to finally put myself first, even if it meant losing the only family I had left. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if overhearing that conversation had lifted a fog I didn't even know was there. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and a yellow legal pad, making lists like I used to do when Adam was young and money was tight. At the top of the first page, I wrote monthly expenses, Adam's family, and began itemizing everything. Rent, $1,800. Utilities, average $200. Car payment, $325. Phone bills, $140 for their family plan. Groceries when they were short, usually another $200 to $300 a month. Miscellaneous emergencies, anywhere from $200 to $800 monthly. The total made my stomach turn, nearly $3,000 every month. And that didn't include the bigger expenses like Tommy's daycare, birthday parties, or the unexpected costs that always seem to arise. On the second page, I wrote my monthly income and listed my pension, my Social Security, and the small amount I still earned from the rental property I owned across town. The numbers were comfortable for a single 70-year-old woman living modestly. But subtract Adam's expenses, and I was barely breaking even most months. How had I not seen this before? How had I convinced myself this was normal, sustainable, or even fair? The third page was the hardest to write. At the top, I wrote what I've sacrificed, and began listing everything I'd given up to support their lifestyle. The kitchen renovation I'd been planning for 5 years. The vacation to Ireland I dreamed of since I was young. The new car to replace my 15-year-old Honda that needed constant repairs. The emergency fund my financial advisor had recommended I build. But the material things weren't the worst of it. I'd sacrifice friendships because I was always available for babysitting that never happened. I turned down invitations because I needed to keep my schedule open in case Adam's family needed me. I'd stopped pursuing hobbies because every spare dollar went to supporting their standard of living. I'd made myself smaller and smaller to accommodate their needs, and they'd responded by seeing me as exactly that small. By afternoon, I'd made my decision. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my online banking. It took me nearly an hour to cancel all the automatic transfers and standing payments. Rent, utilities, car payment, phone bill. All of it stopped with a few clicks and confirmation numbers. My hands were steady as I worked, which surprised me. I'd expected to feel guilty or uncertain, but instead I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years and could finally exhale. The hardest part was changing my will. I'd been planning to leave everything to Adam naturally. The house, my savings, the rental property, everything. But sitting in my attorney's office that Thursday afternoon, I realized that leaving everything to Adam meant leaving it to Skylar. And after what I'd heard, I couldn't stomach the thought of her getting 1 penny of what I'd worked my entire life to build. Are you sure about these changes, Janet? My attorney asked, reviewing the new documents. This is quite different from your previous will. I'm certain, I said. I want 75% to go to the children's hospital where I used to work. 25% can go to Adam, but only if he's divorced from his current wife. If he's still married to her when I die, that portion goes to the hospital as well. Felt dramatic, but then again what I discovered felt dramatic too. I wasn't trying to punish Adam exactly. I was trying to protect my life's work from being used by someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. The attorney made notes and assured me the new will would be ready for signing by the following week. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. That evening, Eleanor came over with a bottle of wine and a casserole. I've been thinking about our conversation, she said, settling into my living room chair. How are you feeling about everything? Different, I said honestly. Like I've been sleepwalking for 3 years and finally woke up. And what are you going to do about it? I told her about the canceled payments, about the will changes. Eleanor listened, nodding slowly. You know they're going to notice when the rent doesn't go through, she said gently. I know. And they're going to call you. I know. Are you prepared for that? I considered the question. Was I prepared for Adam's confused phone calls? For Skylar's manipulative attempts to get the money flowing again? For the possibility that they might cut me out of Tommy's life entirely? I think I have to be, I said finally. Because the alternative is continuing to pretend that buying their tolerance is the same thing as earning their love. Eleanor reached over and squeezed my hand. You're braver than you think, Janet. The weekend passed quietly. Too quietly. Usually, Adam called on Saturday mornings to chat about the week, or to see if I wanted to join them for something. But my phone stayed silent, and I realized they were probably busy enjoying their barbecue with friends. The barbecue I decided not to attend, and apparently hadn't been missed at. Monday morning I decided to treat myself to something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the fancy cafe downtown, and ordered the most expensive breakfast on the menu. Eggs Benedict with smoked salmon, fresh fruit, and coffee that cost more than I usually spent on groceries for a day. As I sat by the window watching people hurry past on their way to work, I felt a strange sense of possibility. For the first time in 3 years, my day was entirely my own. No one needed me to run errands or babysit or solve financial problems. No one was counting on me for anything. It should have felt lonely, but instead it felt like freedom. My phone buzzed around 10:30. A text from Adam. Hey Mom, can you call me when you get a chance? Need to talk to you about something. I stared at the message for a long moment. The rent would have been due yesterday, and automated payments typically processed on Monday mornings. They discovered the money wasn't coming. Instead of calling immediately like I normally would, I finished my breakfast. I ordered a second cup of coffee and a pastry I didn't need but wanted. I sat in that sunny cafe and read the newspaper from front to back, something I hadn't had time for in months. It was almost noon when I finally called Adam back. Mom! His voice was tight with stress. I've been trying to reach you. I got your message. What's going on? There's some kind of problem with the rent payment. It didn't go through this morning, and the landlord's already calling. I don't understand what happened. I could have made it easy for him. I could have pretended it was a banking error, promised to fix it immediately, even offered to call the bank myself. The old Janet would have done exactly that. That's strange, I said instead. Have you checked with your bank? It's not coming from our account, Mom. It's the transfer from yours. The automatic one you set up. Ah, so he'd known all along that I was paying their rent. Of course he had. How could he not know where $1,800 a month was coming from? I canceled that transfer, I said simply. Silence. Long shocked silence. You what? I canceled the automatic transfers. All of them. But why? Mom, what's going on? Did we do something wrong? His voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying not to panic. The same tone he'd used as a child when he'd broken something and was hoping I wouldn't notice. We can talk about it later, I said. I'm out right now. Out? Mom, this is urgent. The landlord wants the rent today or we'll be charged a late fee. And if it's not paid by Friday, we could face eviction. Eviction? The word was supposed to scare me, supposed to send me rushing to their rescue. And it might have if I hadn't heard Skylar's voice explaining how they could just move somewhere cheaper if I stopped paying. That does sound stressful, I said calmly. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Figure something out? Mom, we don't have $1,800 just sitting around. You know that. But I didn't know that. According to Skylar's phone conversation, they'd been living comfortably beyond their means because my guilt money allowed it. If they were truly struggling, truly living paycheck to paycheck, wouldn't they have chosen a cheaper apartment to begin with? I need to go, I said. We'll talk soon. Mom, wait. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 3 years, Adam needed something from me and I'd said no. Not let me think about it. Or, maybe we can work something out. Just no. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the art museum, something I'd been meaning to do for months but never had time for. I wandered through galleries, read plaques, sat on benches admiring paintings I'd never taken the time to notice before. In the contemporary wing, I found myself standing in front of a painting called Breaking Free. It showed a bird emerging from a cage, its wings spread wide against a bright blue sky. The cage door was open, had been open all along, but the bird was just now realizing it could fly. I understood that bird. When I got home that evening, my phone showed 7 missed calls from Adam and 3 from Skylar. There were text messages too, each one more desperate than the last. Mom, please call me back. We really need to talk about this. I don't understand what's happening. Did I do something to upset you? Skylar's really worried. She thinks you might be sick or having some kind of breakdown. A breakdown. That's what they'd call it when a 70-year-old woman finally stopped allowing herself to be financially exploited. When she finally said enough. I made myself dinner and sat down to eat it in peace. Tomorrow I knew they'd probably show up at my door. There would be tears, apologies, promises to do better. Skylar would deploy her full arsenal of manipulation, and Adam would look confused and hurt. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I was eating a meal I'd paid for with money that was truly mine, in a house that belonged to me, with no obligations except the ones I chose to accept. It felt like the beginning of getting my life back. I woke up Tuesday morning to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Even before I looked, I knew what I'd find. The missed calls had started at 6 in the morning and hadn't stopped. 15 from Adam, 8 from Skylar, and several from numbers I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered turning the phone off entirely. But I needed to see how far they'd go, how desperate they'd become when their financial safety net was suddenly gone. The voicemails told the story of their escalating panic. First, Adam at 6:15 a.m. Mom, it's me again. I couldn't sleep last night. I keep thinking there must be some kind of misunderstanding. Can you please call me back? I'm really worried about you. Worried about me. Not angry, not demanding, but worried. It was a calculated approach designed to make me feel guilty for causing him distress. Skylar at 7:30. Janet, it's Skylar. Adam told me what happened with the rent payment. I'm sure there's just been some confusion. Could you call us back? We'd love to take you to lunch today and talk through whatever's going on. Lunch, where I'd undoubtedly be expected to pick up the check, while they explained how much they needed my continued support. The messages continued throughout the morning, each one more desperate than the last. By 10 a.m., Adam's voice had lost its careful composure. Mom, this is serious. The landlord called again. If we don't have the rent by end of business today, we're going to be charged a $200 late fee. I know you don't want us to have to pay extra fees. Please just call me back. The assumption that I didn't want them to pay late fees was telling. As if my primary concern in life was making sure they never faced any financial consequences for their choices. At 11, Skylar's voice had developed an edge. Janet, I don't know what's going on, but this isn't like you. Tommy keeps asking where Grandma is. I hate having to tell him you're too busy to see him. Please don't let whatever's bothering you affect your relationship with your grandson. There it was. The manipulation I'd been expecting. Using Tommy as leverage, making me the villain in his story. The old Janet would have cracked at that one, would have been on the phone immediately, apologizing and promising to fix everything. But the old Janet hadn't known she was being called a pathetic approval seeker behind her back. I made myself breakfast and took it out to my garden. The tomatoes were coming in beautifully this year, and I'd actually have time to enjoy the harvest instead of rushing off to solve someone else's crisis. My phone buzzed with a text from Adam. Tried calling the bank. They said you specifically requested to cancel all automatic transfers to our accounts. Is this about money? If you're having financial problems, we can help. They could help. Adam, who hadn't paid his own rent in 3 years, was offering to help me with my finances. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Around noon, a car door slammed in my driveway. Through my kitchen window, I watched Adam and Skylar get out of their car, both looking tense and determined. Tommy wasn't with them, which meant they'd left him with a babysitter rather than using him as a prop for this conversation. Smart of them. I took my time answering the door, finishing my cup of tea and checking my appearance in the hallway mirror. When I finally opened it, they both started talking at once. Mom, thank God you're okay. Janet, we were so worried. I held up my hand, one at a time. And please come in. They followed me to the living room, both perching on the edge of the couch like they were ready to bolt. The contrast to their usual relaxed presence in my home was striking. Mom, Adam began, his voice carefully controlled. Can you help us understand what's going on? Yesterday you seemed fine. And then suddenly all the payment arrangements we had were canceled. Payment arrangements. Such a clinical way to describe 3 years of financial support. I decided I didn't want to continue those arrangements, I said simply, settling into my favorite chair. Skylar leaned forward, her expression earnest and concerned. Is this about the barbecue? Because you didn't miss anything, I promise. It was just a few neighbors and some people from Adam's work. Nothing special. It's not about the barbecue. Then what? Adam's frustration was starting to show. Did we say something? Do something? I've been racking my brain trying to figure out what changed. I looked at him, this son I'd raised and sacrificed for, and wondered if he genuinely didn't understand or if he was simply playing dumb. Did he really not see how their relationship with me had become purely transactional? When was the last time you called me just to talk? I asked. Not because you needed something, not because there was a problem to solve, but just to see how I was doing? Adam blinked, clearly thrown by the question. We talk all the time, Mom. We do. About Tommy's daycare costs. About your car problems. About unexpected expenses. When was the last time you asked about my book club? Or how my garden was growing? Or whether I was happy? An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Skylar's perfect composure was starting to crack around the edges. Janet, she said carefully, I think you might be overthinking this. We care about you so much. You're such an important part of our family. Am I? Or am I just an important part of your budget? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Adam's face went pale. That's not fair, Mom. You know how much you mean to us. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I mean about $3,000 a month to you. Skylar gasped, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. How can you say that? After everything we've shared, all the time we've spent together, all the love I've bought and paid for. The mask slipped then just for a second. I saw something cold flash in Skylar's eyes before she caught herself and rearranged her features back into hurt confusion. I don't understand where this is coming from, she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. We've never asked you for anything. Everything you've done, you offered to do. It was masterful, really. The way she could twist reality until I was the one who seemed unreasonable. If I hadn't heard that phone conversation, I might have believed her. You're right, I said. I did offer. And now I'm unoffering. Adam stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. Mom, we can't just suddenly come up with $1,800 for rent. You know that. We budget based on what we can afford, and that's with your help. Then maybe you should have budgeted for an apartment you could actually afford. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Adam stared at me like I'd slapped him. This isn't like you, he said quietly. You've always been there for us. Always supported us. I don't understand what's changed. What had changed was that I'd finally heard the truth about what they really thought of my support. But I wasn't ready to reveal that card yet. What's changed is that I'm 70 years old, and I'm tired of being taken for granted. Skylar's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, I thought, though probably more from frustration than sadness. "We don't take you for granted," she whispered. "You're Tommy's grandmother. Your family. We love you." "Then prove it." "How?" I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. "Pay your own bills for 6 months. Visit me without needing anything. Call me just to chat. Show me that your love doesn't come with a price tag attached." Adam sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. 6 months? "Mom, we'll be homeless in a week if we can't make this month's rent." "No, you won't. You'll figure something out. Maybe you'll move somewhere cheaper. Maybe you'll get a second job. Maybe you'll ask Skylar's parents for help for once." Skylar stiffened at the mention of her parents. Interesting. In 3 years, I'd never heard them ask her family for financial assistance. Only mine. "My parents aren't in a position to help," she said quickly. "But I always am." No answer to that. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads, calculating options, weighing alternatives. Finally, Adam looked up. "If we can figure out this month's rent on our own, will you reconsider? Will you at least think about maybe helping with utilities or something smaller?" Even now, even when I'd explicitly told them I was done being their ATM, they were negotiating for continued access to my wallet. "No," I said firmly. "I won't be reconsidering." Skylar's careful composure finally cracked completely. "This is insane," she burst out, then seemed to realize what she'd said and tried to backtrack. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean. It's just that this is so sudden, so extreme. Cutting us off completely over what seems like a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Skylar. It's a boundary." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw her clearly. Not the sweet, grateful daughter-in-law she pretended to be, but the calculating woman who'd been using my love against me for 3 years. Adam stood up again, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "Fine. We'll figure out the rent. But don't expect us to pretend everything's normal after this. Don't expect to see Tommy whenever you want. Don't expect family dinners and birthday parties and holidays like nothing happened." There it was. The threat I'd been waiting for. "Do what we want or lose access to your grandson." "I understand," I said calmly. "Do you?" Skylar's voice was sharp now, all pretense dropped. "Because Tommy's going to ask where Grandma is. And we're going to have to tell him that Grandma decided money was more important than family." The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were going to poison my relationship with Tommy, turn me into the villain in his story, just because I'd refused to continue funding their lifestyle. But I'd expected this too. In fact, I'd been counting on it. "You do what you think is best," I said, standing up and walking to the front door. "I'll do the same." They followed me to the hallway, both looking shell-shocked that their usual tactics hadn't worked. "Mom," Adam said one more time, his voice breaking slightly. "Please don't do this. Don't throw away our relationship over money." I turned to look at him, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for. "I'm not throwing it away, Adam. I'm finding out if it was ever real to begin with." They left without another word, and I watched from my window as they sat in their car for nearly 10 minutes, clearly having an intense discussion, probably planning their next approach, their next attempt to break down my resolve. But I felt stronger than I had in years. Because for the first time, I'd chosen my own well-being over their comfort. I'd said no and meant it. My phone started ringing again within an hour. This time the calls were coming faster and more frequently. 62 missed calls by the end of the day, from numbers I didn't recognize mixed in with their usual attempts. They were calling from friends' phones, from work phones, probably hoping I'd answer if I didn't recognize the number. The desperation was palpable, and part of me actually felt sorry for them. But only a small part. The larger part remembered Skylar's voice calling me pathetic, remembered years of feeling grateful for scraps of attention I'd paid for, remembered all the dreams I'd deferred to fund their comfortable life. As I went to bed that night, my phone finally silent, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't just cutting off their money, I was cutting off their power over me. And it felt like waking up from a very long dream. 3 weeks passed in blessed silence. No phone calls, no visits, no desperate text messages. At first, I found myself checking my phone obsessively, waiting for the next wave of manipulation. But as the days stretched on, A different kind of quiet settled over my life. The kind I hadn't experienced since before Adam was born. I spent those weeks rediscovering who I was when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's crisis. I joined Eleanor for her morning walks around the neighborhood. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. I drove to the coast for a weekend, staying in a bed and breakfast I'd been wanting to try for years but could never afford. For the first time since retirement, I was actually enjoying it. On Thursday morning of the fourth week, Eleanor called with news. "I saw your daughter-in-law at the grocery store yesterday," she said carefully. She looked different. Different how? Tired. Stressed. She was buying generic brands, counting coupons. And Janet, she was working there, behind the deli counter. Skylar had gotten a job. The woman who'd spent 3 years treating employment like an optional hobby had finally been forced to work for money instead of depending on mine. How did she seem? I asked, though I wasn't sure why I cared. Like someone whose world had been turned upside down. She saw me and tried to hide, but I caught her eye. She looked humbled, I suppose. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. I hadn't wanted to destroy them, just to stop enabling them. But apparently, without my financial support, their comfortable life had collapsed faster than I'd expected. Did she say anything? She asked about you. Whether you were doing all right, whether you'd been sick. I told her you seemed happier than I'd seen you in years. And what did she say to that? Eleanor paused. She started crying right there behind the deli counter. Said she'd made a terrible mistake and didn't know how to fix it. That afternoon, as I was working in my garden, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the lattice fence I saw Adam's car, but only Adam got out. No Skylar, no Tommy. He sat in the driver's seat for several minutes before finally walking to my front door. I watched him through the kitchen window as he raised his hand to knock, then lowered it, then raised it again. Whatever he'd come to say, it wasn't easy for him. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my son. He'd lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look older than his 35 years. "Hi, Mom." "Adam." We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure how to proceed. Finally he spoke. "Can I come in? I know I don't have the right to ask, but I need to talk to you." I stepped aside and he followed me to the living room. But instead of sitting down, he remained standing, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Skylar and I separated last week," he said without preamble. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had been expecting this outcome. "I'm sorry to hear that." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Are you? Because I think this is what you wanted all along." "I never wanted your marriage to fail, Adam. Didn't you? When you cut off all our support, you had to know what would happen. We couldn't afford the apartment, couldn't afford anything. The stress, the fighting about money constantly. It destroyed us." I felt a flicker of guilt, but I pushed it down. "Your marriage fell apart because I stopped paying your bills? Don't act like you don't know exactly what you did." His voice was bitter, angry in a way I'd rarely heard from him. But underneath the anger, I could hear something else. Pain. Real raw pain that had nothing to do with money. "Where are you living now?" I asked. "I'm staying with a friend from work. Skylar moved back in with her parents with Tommy." He finally sat down, his shoulders slumping with exhaustion. "I get to see him 2 days a week, if I can afford to do something fun with him. And Skylar is working at a grocery store and tells everyone who'll listen that my crazy mother destroyed our family over nothing." He looked up at me, his eyes blazing. "Is that what this was about, Mom?" "Nothing. This was my moment." I could tell him about the phone conversation, about overhearing Skylar's cruel words about me. I could make him understand that this wasn't about nothing, that I'd been protecting myself from years of emotional abuse and financial exploitation. But looking at my broken son, I realized something important. He was grieving. Not just his marriage, but his entire understanding of his life. And maybe that grief was necessary for him to finally see clearly. "Why don't you tell me what you think this was about?" I said instead. Adam ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was trying to work through a difficult problem. "I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for weeks. At first, I thought maybe you were having financial problems, or maybe someone had convinced you we were taking advantage. But then I started thinking about how things really were. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When was the last time I called you just to see how you were doing? He asked finally. I don't remember. Neither do I. When was the last time we spent time together where I wasn't asking for help with something, or letting you pay for everything? I don't remember that either. His voice cracked slightly. I turned into Dad, didn't I? The comparison hit me like a punch to the stomach. Adam's father had been charming, loving when he needed something, absent when he didn't. He'd used my love as a resource to be mined until it was depleted, then moved on to someone else. Not completely, I said carefully. Your father never felt guilty about taking. You at least seemed to realize something was wrong. But I did it anyway. For 3 years I let you support us while I told myself it was temporary, that we needed the help, that you wanted to do it. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. You did want to do it, didn't you? At first. Yes. At first I wanted to help. But not anymore. Not the way things were, no. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could see him processing, working through years of rationalization and willful blindness. Skylar said you'd get over it eventually, he said finally. That you needed us more than we needed you, so you'd come crawling back. She said all we had to do was wait. The words stung, but they didn't surprise me. That sounded exactly like something Skylar would say. But you don't look like someone who's about to come crawling back, he continued. You look happy. Healthier than I've seen you in years. I am healthier. Because you're not dealing with us anymore. It wasn't a question and I didn't treat it like one. Adam, I said gently, do you remember what you used to call me when you were little? He frowned, confused by the change of subject. Mom. Before that. When you were 3 or 4. A small smile crossed his face for the first time since he'd arrived. My Janet. I used to say my Janet instead of my mom. Do you remember why? Because. He paused, the memory clearly painful now. Because I wanted everyone to know you belonged to me. And I did belong to you, in the way mothers belong to their children. But somewhere along the way that changed. I stopped being your mother and became your resource. And you stopped being my son and became my responsibility. Tears were flowing freely down his face now. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't even know how it happened. It started with just a little help here and there. And then somehow it became this expectation that you'd always be there to fix everything. And when I wasn't, everything fell apart. Our budget, our marriage, our whole life. Because we'd built it all on money that wasn't even ours. The honesty in his voice gave me hope that maybe, eventually, we could rebuild something real between us. But not yet. He had too much healing to do first. What do you want from me now, Adam? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I want to earn the right to be your son again. Not your responsibility, not your charity case. Your son. And how do you plan to do that? I don't know yet. But I know it starts with me figuring out how to take care of myself. How to be an adult who doesn't need his mother to pay his bills. He stood up, looking more determined than he had since he'd arrived. I don't want money from you. I don't want you to fix this mess I made. I just want to know that someday if I can prove I've changed, there might be a place for me in your life again. My heart ached for him, for the little boy who used to call me my Janet, for the man who'd lost his way and was finally trying to find it again. There will always be a place for you in my life, Adam. But it has to be as my son, not as someone I'm obligated to support. I understand. He walked toward the door, then turned back. Mom? I know I don't have the right to ask, but will you think about maybe seeing Tommy sometimes? When I have him. He asks about you. The mention of my grandson made my chest tight. I'd missed him terribly, but I'd also known that using a child as leverage was a line I wouldn't let them cross. When you're ready to have a relationship with me that isn't about money, we can talk about Tommy too. He nodded, accepting the boundary I'd set. That's fair. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from a complicated mix of relief, hope and grief for all the time we'd wasted on a relationship built on the wrong foundation. But for the first time in months, I felt like my son might actually grow up to be a man I could be proud of. It would just take time and probably more pain than either of us wanted to endure. The hardest part was over, though. I'd stopped enabling, stopped rescuing, stopped accepting crumbs of affection in exchange for financial support. I'd chosen my own well-being over their comfort, and somehow that had given Adam the space he needed to finally see clearly. Maybe that's what love really looks like sometimes. Not giving people what they want, but refusing to prevent them from learning what they need to know. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my newly renovated home, admiring the pale blue cabinets I'd dreamed of for years. The contractor had finished the work the week before, and I was still marveling at how different the space felt. Brighter, more open, entirely mine. The renovation had cost exactly what I used to spend on Adam's family in 4 months. The irony wasn't lost on me. Eleanor knocked on the back door, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a wide grin. Ready for the grand reveal party? I laughed, opening the door to let her in. It's just a kitchen, Eleanor. It's not just a kitchen. It's your declaration of independence. She wasn't wrong. Every tile, every fixture, every carefully chosen detail represented a choice I'd made for myself, with money I'd earned and saved. No one else's needs or opinions had factored into the decisions. It felt revolutionary. The doorbell rang as we were arranging flowers in my new vase. Through the front window, I could see a familiar figure on my porch, but it took me a moment to recognize him. Adam stood there holding a small potted plant, his posture uncertain but hopeful. He'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost during the worst of his separation, and his clothes were clean and pressed. But more than that, something in his bearing had changed. He looked like a man instead of a boy pretending to be one. I opened the door, and we regarded each other carefully. "Hi, Mom. I brought you a housewarming gift." He held out the plant, a small jasmine with tiny white flowers. "I remember you used to love the smell of jasmine." I did love jasmine, and I was touched that he'd remembered. "Thank you. Would you like to come in?" He followed me to the kitchen, where Eleanor was pretending to be busy arranging champagne flutes so she wouldn't have to make small talk. "Wow," Adam said, looking around. "This is incredible. It looks like something from a magazine." "Thank you." I set the jasmine on the windowsill where it would catch the morning sun. "How have you been?" "Better. Different, but better." He accepted the cup of coffee I offered him. "I got promoted at work last month. Nothing huge, but it comes with a raise and better benefits." "That's wonderful." "And I moved into my own apartment. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm paying for it myself." There was pride in his voice that I hadn't heard in years. Pride in his own accomplishments rather than in what someone else had provided for him. "I'm proud of you," I said, and meant it. "Thanks." He was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me with an expression I recognized from his childhood. "I've been going to therapy." "Oh, about the divorce at first. But then about other things. About Dad leaving, about money, about the way I've been living my life." He paused, gathering courage. "About the way I treated you." Eleanor excused herself to check on something in the garden, giving us privacy for this conversation. "What did you learn?" I asked. "A lot of uncomfortable things." Adam managed a rueful smile. "My therapist says I've been using money as a substitute for emotional intimacy my whole life. Taking it when I felt unloved, giving it when I felt guilty. Never actually dealing with the real issues." "And what are the real issues?" He was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. "I never forgave you for Dad leaving." The words hung between us, raw and honest. "Even though I knew it wasn't your fault, even though I saw how hard you worked to take care of us after he left, part of me blamed you. And I think I've been punishing you for it ever since." My throat tightened. "Punishing me how?" "By taking everything you offered and never giving anything back. By letting you pay for my life while keeping you at arm's length emotionally. By making sure you needed me more than I needed you, so you could never leave too." The insight was so clear, so brutally accurate that it took my breath away. All those years I'd thought Adam was just immature or thoughtless. I'd never considered that his behavior might be deliberate, even if unconsciously so. And Skylar saw an opportunity and exploited it. She understood what I was doing better than I did. His voice hardened slightly. "She used to laugh about how easy it was to manipulate you. Said you were so desperate to be needed that you'd pay any price to feel important." Hearing it confirmed was still painful, but not as devastating as it would have been 6 months ago. I'd built a life beyond their manipulation now. I'm sorry I let her, Adam continued. I'm sorry I participated in it. I'm sorry I turned your love into a transaction, and then complained when you finally closed the account. The apology felt genuine, not strategic. There was no hidden agenda behind it, no request for reconciliation or forgiveness that came with conditions. Thank you for saying that, I said. It helps to understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I have to earn that, but I wanted you to know that I see what I did now, and I'm working to become someone different. Someone who deserves to be your son. We talked for another hour, carefully and honestly in a way we hadn't since he was a child. He told me about his apartment, his job, his new understanding of himself. I told him about the pottery classes, the renovations, the trip to Ireland I was planning for the spring. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. Mom, he said, hesitating on the threshold. I know this is asking a lot, but I have Tommy this weekend. He's been asking about you and I was wondering if maybe you'd like to see him. Not to babysit or anything like that. Just to visit. My heart clenched at the mention of my grandson. I'd missed him terribly, but I'd also known that maintaining boundaries was necessary for any chance at a healthy relationship. Where were you thinking? The park? I could pick you up, we could spend an hour or two at the playground, and then I'd bring you home. No strings attached, no expectations beyond just spending time together. It sounded genuine. More importantly, it sounded like Adam was taking responsibility for facilitating the relationship rather than expecting me to do all the emotional labor. I'd like that, I said. His face lit up with relief and joy. Really? Saturday afternoon. Saturday afternoon. After he left, Eleanor came back inside with a knowing smile. How did that go? Better than I expected. He's actually growing up. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question as I looked around my beautiful new kitchen, at the jasmine plant Adam had brought, at the life I'd built for myself over the past 6 months. Hopeful, I said finally, but not desperate. Saturday afternoon, Adam arrived exactly when he'd said he would. Tommy bounded out of the car and threw himself into my arms with the uncomplicated joy that only 3-year-olds possess. Grandma Janet, Daddy said we're going to play at the park. We are indeed, I said, breathing in his sweet little boy scent. At the playground, I watched Adam interact with his son. He was present in a way I'd never seen before, not distracted by his phone or stressed about money. He pushed Tommy on the swings, built elaborate sand castles, and listened intently to Tommy's rambling stories about preschool. He's different, I observed when Tommy ran off to climb on the jungle gym. Therapy, Adam said simply. And not having Skylar constantly in his ear about what a burden everything is. Turns out I actually enjoy being a father when I'm not stressed about money all the time. And how are things with Skylar? Difficult. She's angry that I'm not trying to get back together. Angry that I'm not asking you for money to pay child support. Angry that her plan to manipulate you back into our lives didn't work. He shrugged. But that's her problem to solve, not mine. We sat in comfortable silence watching Tommy play. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually spending time with my family rather than managing them. Mom, Adam said eventually, I need you to know that this isn't a strategy to get back in your good graces so you'll help us financially again. Even if you never give me another penny, I want to rebuild our relationship. I know. Do you? Because I know I've burned through a lot of trust. I turned to look at him. This man who was finally becoming the person I'd hoped he could be. I can see the difference, Adam. In how you talk, how you act, how you are with Tommy. You're not the same person who sat in my living room 6 months ago, expecting me to solve all your problems. Good. Because I never want to be that person again. As we packed up to leave, Tommy ran over and hugged my legs. Will you come play with us again, Grandma? If your daddy invites me. I will, Adam said immediately. Next weekend if you're free. Driving home alone, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because Adam was finally treating me the way I deserved, though that was part of it, but because I discovered something more important. I didn't need him to treat me well in order to be happy. That evening, I called Eleanor to tell her about the afternoon. It sounds like your tough love approach worked, she said. Maybe. But the most important thing it did was teach me that I could live without their approval. And now that you don't need it? Now maybe we can build something real. 3 months later, Adam and I have settled into a new routine. He visits every other week, sometimes with Tommy, sometimes alone. We talk about his job, my hobbies, current events, books we've read. Normal conversations between adults who care about each other. He's never asked me for money, not once. When his car needed repairs last month, he handled it himself. When Tommy needed new clothes for the season change, Adam budgeted for it. When his apartment lease came up for renewal and he found a better place, he saved for the moving expenses. It's such a small thing being financially independent, but watching Adam navigate his own challenges without looking to me for rescue has been deeply satisfying. He's becoming a man I can respect as well as love. As for me, I'm planning that trip to Ireland in the spring. I've also signed up for a watercolor painting class, and am considering adopting a dog from the shelter where I volunteer. My life is full in ways it never was when it revolved around solving other people's problems. Sometimes I think about Skylar working at that grocery store, probably still bitter about how everything fell apart. I don't wish her ill, but I don't waste energy feeling sorry for her either. She made choices based on what she thought she could get away with, and those choices caught up with her. The truth is, I'm grateful for that overheard phone conversation. It was painful to learn how little they thought of me, but it was also liberating. It freed me from the exhausting work of trying to earn love that was never really available anyway. Now, at 70 years old, I'm finally learning what it feels like to be valued for who I am rather than what I can provide. It's a lesson that came later than I would have liked, but not too late to matter. And that, I've discovered, makes all the difference.